Yo, what up? It's been a long time and I shouldn't have left you without a comic book movie spoiler review to YouTube. Is that right? Yeah, that's right. Anyways, we're breaking down the death of Superman.
Wait a minute.
That's not right. Anyways, let's get into it. First and foremost, I think Warner Brothers and DC Animation did a great job with this latest edition of their new 52 continuity. For those who aren't in the loop, the same way Marvel has the big screen, silver screen, you know, the MCU fully canonized run of movies. You know, if you see Iron Man and you see Thor and you see Avengers and you see you know, all the movies, Guardians of the Galaxy, they all create one cohesive narrative and they all have a storyline to them, even if it's not an Avengers movie. You know, they could be off on the other side of the galaxy and it's still within canon of what's going on Earth with Spider-Man or whatever. And DC has this animated universe with all of their Justice League characters, and you can have a solo Batman movie, or in this case you can have a Superman movie. And just like how MCU is doing it, DC has that locked down on the animated front way better than the DCEU, the DCFU, whatever the DC they want to call it. I don't know. They're doing a horrible job on that front. But with the animation, they've been doing a pretty good job. It's just like a small concentrated audience, you know. They got this fever of nerds that just want the animated stuff because the movies are just garbage. Let's stop talking about the movies, although I'll bring up Justice League a little bit, maybe Batman vs. Superman a little bit, but let's get into the death of Superman. So Superman is a character that is hard to get right. You know, like the essence of Superman is so hard to pin down, and yet it seems so simple. How do you humanize Superman is really the best way to tell a good Superman story. And Warner Brothers and DC, they've been trying to put out the quintessential Superman movie for a while, actually. You had the Man of Steel movie, which I think is underrated. I think it's an excellent, not only comic book movie, but just sci-fi, you know, alien comes to Earth movie, and a great adoption story. Put all that together, you got a cool movie where you can actually give some human context to Superman, you know, like, I just want to be your son, and then Pa Kent's like, you are my son, you know, like, that gives heart to the movie. And I felt like they've had some good attempts with the animated stuff. They dropped All-Star Superman right off the bat in the beginning. That did, you know, good numbers for them. You had Lex Luthor come in. You had Superman with some type of, like, the solar cells in his body weren't regenerating, so he was becoming mortal. And, you know, he spent a day with Lois, you know, gave her some super pills so she could experience what he experienced. And, you know, he's like in the Fortress of Solitude, and it tried to, you know, like I said before, humanize Superman. And, you know, if he knew that his time was coming to an end and that he was gonna die soon, how would he spend the end of his days? And that was actually, you know, a very interesting thing to watch. And you had a big showdown similar to this movie with the Doomsday Showdown, but it's not quite, you know, the quintessential Superman story. It's close, but it's not quite there. And then they had Unbound. You know, Brainiac tries to put Metropolis in a jar. I think he actually does put it in a jar, and he has it floating around in a spaceship. And, you know, Superman has to save his home, not only city, but the whole planet Earth, which is his new home, from Brainiac. And Brainiac already destroyed Krypton, so there's, you know, a personal element. You know, his old home is lost, but he still has to save his new home, and there's something special about his new home, you know, being raised there that kind of humanizes Superman. He's not just an alien from Krypton. But even still, I felt like it falls just a little bit short. And this one, I don't know what they did, but they nailed it. I mean, the relationship that he has with Lois is, you know, like one of the best renditions of it that I've seen. He has that insecurity of being Clark Kent and the vulnerability that comes with that identity, and struggling with whether or not to tell Lois that he is Superman. And that's something we've seen in the comics, we've seen in the movies, we've seen in the television shows, and they brought that to life. And like, you know, like a lemon, they just squeezed out the juice of it. They didn't make it all about that, but that was like a strong element that pushed the story forward. And then you also had not only the Justice League, but all of like Metropolis and the whole world looking up to Superman as this ideal version of ourselves, something that we should strive to be, a symbol of hope. Ding, 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 what's that thing on his chest? It's a symbol of hope. And he himself embodies that symbol with his actions, with his very existence, with his almost perfection, you know, his like perfect DNA, his embodiment of almost a god here on earth. And not, you know, a cruel god like in the Bible or something, but like a true like savior of mankind. He's one of us from planet Earth, and he is the best of us, and he sets the example. So fast forward, you know, the Justice League is fighting Doomsday, which is an unstoppable monster. In the comics, it's a Kryptonian, you know, invention. They like bred him to be an unkillable beast, but in this cartoon, all you know is that it's just a monster that has come down to wreak havoc, kill everything it can find, and it's seeking opponents. It's, you know, going to the city because that's where the people are. It's fighting Superman because Superman poses the biggest threat, but Superman doesn't show up right away. So this is what I was saying. I was going to bring up the Justice League movie just a little bit. Forgive me, I know. Justice League movies so bad. But anyways, they did one thing right, which is they have the Justice League taking on Doomsday, just like they were taking on Steppenwolf, and they were doing alright, but you know, they're not enough. You know, all together, neither one of them, you know, is really strong enough to hurt Doomsday. So it doesn't matter if there's 5 of them or 10 of them. If no one can actually hurt Doomsday, then they're all pretty much ineffective, if you get what I'm saying. And so I like also narratively, and you know, it's like a little metaphor almost that they did with the storytelling, is that as the Justice League is fighting Doomsday, he's like wearing this scientific looking suit. You know, it's in, you know, the movies, not the movies, the comics, and you know, even the video game, the Injustice one that came out. He's got this, you know, weird sci-fi looking suit on, and they can't even break through the suit. So that kind of lets you know, like, this isn't even my final form. And then finally, after Doomsday has defeated all of the Justice League, you know, and Wonder Woman, she puts up a good fight, and even that kind of sets up, like, man, look how badass and tough Wonder Woman is, and even she got put down. So when finally Superman shows up, it really dwarfs the power of all the Justice League members. Like, it really cements Superman as numero uno, like, most powerful being on Earth. And then, you know, finally we get to see Doomsday, you know, the costume has been burnt away, and it's finally, you know, mano a mano, Superman and Doomsday throwing down. And much like in the Death of Superman comics, it's this huge, you know, city crumbling, building smashing, up and out of the atmosphere, crashing back down into the atmosphere. Another thing that they did in the Batman vs. Superman movie, you know, just the scale of these two fighters, these two, you know, unfathomably powerful and strong characters that can punch each other up into space and then punch each other back down to Earth and live to tell about it. And a cool thing they did in the BVS, which is have Doomsday evolve as he begins to take damage. So if you learn how to hurt him, he will evolve in a way that makes him harder to be hurt. So you see the spikes growing out of his elbows and shoulders and face, and he gets more bony and bony as the fight progresses, much like in the movie, which is cool because it shows you just what Doomsday is, because we don't know much about him. We don't know where he comes from. We don't know his desires, his thoughts. All we know is that he gets harder to kill the more you try to kill him. And then finally, again, bringing back the BVS DCEU. I know. It's sad that it took the cartoon to make it work, but finally, Superman does take out Doomsday, and Doomsday takes out Superman with the bony thing through the heart, and we get to see just what a kind of impact Superman had on, not just Lois, not just the League members, but really everyone who I mentioned before who looked up to him. People who, had been saved by Superman, and now they live a better life where they're trying to help others because of the help that they received from Superman. And to know that he's no longer out there, it kind of takes something out of these characters' soul, like the hero that was looking out for me is no longer there, so I have less security looking out for the others, even smaller guy who needs even more help than I do. So that was like the missing piece that all these movies, all these adaptations of the character, just, they always had like 95, 90%, even the best of them. But this movie had every single relationship and every single tie that he had to the planet Earth. And that's what finally made him relatable. It's not that anyone can be a Kryptonian with superpowers and laser vision and fly around the world backwards and change time and do all this unrelatable things, but we all have people that we look up to, people that inspire us to be the best version of ourselves, and that's what makes this film relatable, that's what makes it impactful, that's what makes it emotional. When Superman dies, you actually feel it because of how the other characters feel. I feel like in Batman vs. Superman, when he dies and you see Amy Adams, Lois Lane character, like, oh man, that kind of sucks. I'm not very happy about that. I'm like, I showed more emotion when my goldfish died. So, I don't know. I just really dug the way they had the characters who cared about Superman really bring home the weight, because you can't just make a relatable Superman movie. You have to have a reason to care, and this movie gave you a reason to care. And speaking of larger than life, people who inspire you to do, the best you can do, I want to give a special shout out to Mr. Big John Schnepp. Those of you who are nerdy enough to watch this type of content are probably aware that we lost the big guy. He was a real life Superman. He was super heroic with the content that he put out, the passion that he put into being a fan of comic books and science fiction. It really inspired me to make videos and to make comics and to make animations and put it out every month. So I like to especially dedicate this review of The Death of Superman to John Schnepp, who, if you don't know, made a documentary on a movie with Nicolas Cage. What? It was going to be directed by Tim Burton at that too, where he was going to make a Death of Superman movie, and John Schnepp made the documentary about this Superman movie that was almost made. So it's a shame that the big man had to pass just before this came out. It would have been cool for him to see it. And if you haven't already, go check out the GoFundMe page so you can donate to John Schnepp and his family. The doctor bills are through the roof, and we can all pitch in to Holly Payne and the Schnepp family. And I just want to say I miss you, big guy. Peace.